I'd been really strong all day, and it just was really hard to get back home and to see everything in the room and to walk by everything baby and just know that she's not there.
Jessica and I were dating in high school, and I watched an adoption process unfold with my little sister. I had one biological sister, and my parents ended up adopting Angel, and she certainly was an angel that God brought into our lives, but it started with foster care. And she was brought home from the hospital at 5 days old, and I watched that process unfold.
That kind of started the conversation between me and Kevin. You know, we were teenagers. We weren't thinking about kids at that point. We just talked about, I want to adopt one day. After Callie was born, she was about 2, and then I started thinking about it, and it kind of got in my brain, and I could not get it out of my brain.
And so we just kind of jumped in. We said, well, it's a beautiful picture of the gospel. It's a beautiful picture of what God's called us to, so let's just start the process. Had no idea what we were getting into, had no idea what the process would entail, and we decided, let's go, let's get started.
When we began the process, it was almost 3 years ago that we started the process, and we started with the state. We thought we would adopt through foster care. We started there. It took a year for our home study to get cleared. We met a lot of kids, and there were so many different kids I can name, in my mind that I imagined in my family, and I could imagine bringing them home. We read their files, and we watched the videos that talked about them, and we talked about so many of them and how they would fit into our life. And doors closed, doors closed, doors closed. It was just always a closed door. And when we finally did get cleared, Black Hawk called. We paused.
And I'll never forget the moment when we were really learning about Black Hawk, this place to which God was stirring and moving us towards here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And we looked and saw that there was an adoption ministry at Black Hawk. And that moment was a moment that God really used, a kind of a cornerstone moment for that whole journey.
One of the coolest parts about Black Hawk is that it has an adoption ministry.
I remember when we finally decided, after we had gotten moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana, that it was time. And it was a pretty quick turnaround, that we just said, God's not through with this whole journey of adoption with us yet. So we re-engaged in the process to really quickly be matched. And it came through an amazing connection. We moved from Georgia to Indiana. In Indiana, are connected with a family who heads an adoption agency in Kansas, who connects us to a birth mom. And all of that happened so fast, and it was really this time of joy and excitement, like, wow, God is really going to pick up those pieces that were put on pause so quickly and move us forward into what's next.
And that's when we started getting connected to birth moms. And so the first birth mom that we got connected to, it fell through. That was really hard. I felt really disappointed. I really just felt like, here we go again, because I had really gotten excited so many times. We had had so many conversations about so many children.
So we'd already been through one failed adoption. Guards are up, but we felt like God started tearing the guards down when we were matched again. And it was a 6-month process. And through that 6-month process leading up to the date of birth, the expected due date, I watched and tried to do as much as I could to keep us stabilized, to be stabilized myself, and to walk the best I could through that whole journey with my wife, who fought every day to let her guard down and to connect not just with this potential baby that would come into our home, but to connect with this birth mom that God had just clearly called us to.
I just felt like God just made it abundantly clear that, hey, your calling is not just to this child, it's to the birth mom as well. And the next couple of months, I really poured into the birth mom. We spent a lot of time talking. I remember sharing some of Kevin's sermons actually with her. I watched them. We talked about God. We talked about how I would raise her child, to know Jesus. And so I really grew really close to her. And then we stayed connected up until probably 2 weeks prior to the baby's birth due date.
My guard really came down when we were nearing the end of that 6-month period where we're pouring into this birth mom and preparing our home, when I finally saw the nesting phase kick in for Jessica when she had a couple of baby showers, and all of a sudden the house was filling up with everything baby, and we had everything set up, lined up, and I watched my wife just have everything completed.
2 weeks before the due date, I really began to get everything ready. I got the diaper bag ready and packed. I got my suitcase ready and packed. I had the room. I had our little crib beside our bed in our room, and everything was ready and set up. I even remember that for so long I would not take a tag off of any of the clothes because I knew there was a possibility this could fall through and I'm going to have to take them back, and what if it's a different gender this time? You know, just all those what ifs seemed to always just cloud my brain and my heart. And so when that 2 weeks before, I really just went for it, you know, just finally just let go and said, okay, God, we're doing this. I'm all in. Let's go.
I remember for me watching her get the crib ready in our bedroom. That was the point at which I knew I'm going to be a dad again. And she's ready, we're ready, our family's ready, and the joy, the excitement, the nerves, the still in the back of our mind, a little bit of the fear, a little bit of the anxiety of wondering, you know, what could go wrong was there. But overall, we were just ready to take that next step.
2 weeks before the due date, the birth mom stopped communicating with me.
This was not going to happen, that everything we had built towards, everything we had built for, was not going to be the case. It was not going to be a reality. This dream, this plan that we had done everything to prepare for, tried to be obedient.
I remember this particular Saturday morning that I got up and I was feeling so anxious. Like I went in the closet and I cried and I was just like, God, I'm just so anxious. Like, please just, let's get this done. Like I just need to know something. Either way, let's do this. And so I got up and I read a devotional that I'd been reading. Time may be putting your faith to the test, but don't focus on what hasn't happened. Focus on what has happened. If you've seen God do it before, He can do it again. I actually sent the devotional to Kevin to read while I was in the bathroom getting ready, and my friends had actually invited me to come hang out, and so I was feeling anxious all morning, and then I went to go hang out with them. It ended up being a surprise baby shower, to which I walked in and started crying, like at that moment, because all of those emotions were just hitting me like, this is, you know, not even going to happen. Here I am.
God, why would you allow us to be obedient for a 3-year period just to get us all the way to this point, for us not to see the promises that we felt you had given us come to fruition? It was a painful process. It was a painful thing. What hurt the most, I think, in that part of the journey was watching Jessica and feeling very helpless as a husband, as a leader in my home, that I can't fix this problem.
I went through that day all until that evening, and Sunday evening we found out through the aunt of the birth mom that she had had the child, that she had named her, and that it was pretty much over. And so that's the night that I know was the hardest for me and Kevin. We both really struggled.
That Sunday night when everything kind of took the downturn, what I remember the most really was just how God's grace sustained me. Even though I was crumbling, falling apart on the inside, putting on a church smile, it wasn't that God carried me enough to be able to finish the day and finish the task and speak and be on a panel and the things that I had to do that night. What I remember the most was how on the inside God really was sustaining me.
You know, we just sat up and talked, and I just felt mostly bad for him because all I did was sit on the edge of the bed and cry, you know. And, you know, I don't think that you can truly prepare yourself for that kind of loss. In my mind, I felt like I'd lost 2 people. Like I had lost this baby that I had invested in and felt called to, and I had lost this birth mom that I had invested and loved. Monday morning, I got up and I didn't want to talk to anybody. I was pretty angry and frustrated, and I was pretty mad at God. Just took time to tell him how I was just really, really angry with him. And then Tuesday, I really feel like that was the heaviest day for me, that I felt a lot of grief.
And so just 2 days removed from the big downturn that just really started a grieving process. It was Tuesday night, and I remember us sitting up that night and wondering what would be next. I remember this lady pushing us towards just seeking God that night, and I remember just asking the question, what would it look like for us to get some closure in this whole thing, with getting to a place of forgiveness and trust again so we could move forward. And I remember Jessica just saying, I'm ready to just forgive. And I remember you pushing me towards that, because if anything, I was the reluctant party in the whole situation. And I was so proud of you. I was so proud of how you, that night, through all of your pain and through all of those tears, that you pushed us towards taking a step of trust in God and forgiveness for all the pain and the hurt in the midst of the grief. I knew what was right. I knew what to do to be obedient. But you were there, and you really pushed us towards that night. And it was not ironic that it was that night we got to the place where we'd written out some steps of what it was going to look like for us to get to a place of closure and of forgiveness and grace and trust again. And we had taken those steps, written some of those things down. And not ironic is the fact that it was the next day, after that night of finally getting to that spot, it was the next day that little Kaya was born. And it was that night that we got the phone call that there was a little 4-pound, 1-ounce baby girl that needed a family. And I think it's not ironic that God had gotten us to a place of trust and forgiveness and hope again. And the next day is when she was born. We ended up driving to Illinois, meeting this sweet little baby girl in the hospital, middle of the day on Friday.
I just thought, I'm going to burst into tears. This has been such a crazy emotional roller coaster. I'm not going to be able to hold it together. But then when you walk into a room and the birth mother is there as well, and we waited for her to be able to come and to introduce us to baby Kaya. And when she brought her in, you know, it was just a flood of emotions. Like, my heart was hurting for her. My heart was thinking about this little baby that I was just praying we were going to get to take care of, but still worried and guarded that this could still not happen.
So as we looked in and saw her, we knew that there were some very potential and medically inevitable, is what we were even told, medical complications that she would face. She was born 6 weeks early, and we were asked, are you prepared to walk into that? Of course we said yes. There were so many blanks to fill in, even with the adoption process, medically, and all of those things. But then we watched God completely remove from the equation all of the potential obstacles, the medical complications. They just didn't happen, and God just had his hand on this little baby girl.
Yeah, I love it too that she was 6 weeks early, but we felt like it was 3 days late, but she was right on time for God. Like, God had it all on time. He didn't make us wait 6 more weeks for her. She was our little baby, and we didn't know the whole time that it was really her. I remember the first time that I got to hold her and just looking into her eyes, you know, I thought within probably 10 minutes, I just wanted her to be mine.
One of my favorite parts of the story that he wrote is watching my 2 babies, Caleb and Callie, 7 and 5 years old, walking through this journey, praying, watching their parents grieving themselves. They are just as much called to this process as we have been through the whole journey.
I remember Kevin telling me that he had talked with Caleb. He had sat up one night and prayed with him, and that Caleb said, are we going to get the little baby? And Kevin said, you know, I don't know, buddy. We just got to keep praying because God has the baby for us. And so they prayed. And Callie, I remember one night she said, when are you going to go pick up the baby? And, you know, I had tears come down my face, and I said, I don't know, baby. You know, I don't know, but we've been praying this long, it's going to happen. God's going to send us a little baby. We just got to keep praying. And so they prayed.
And then to see them hold their sweet little baby sister for the first time is something I'll never forget, because God revealed his promises to them, and they got to see how truly faithful God is.
God did it again.